Hi, I'm Beth, and this video is brought to you by Baby Lock. Mitered borders really frame a quilt nicely. It works especially well when you have a stripe or another design that you'd like to continue around the quilt. When you're going to add a mitered border, you do need a little extra length to accommodate for that miter. So the formula for this is below, but here's what we're doing. Measure the side of your quilt top. So this is 13 inches. And then you're going to add that to the width of your border times 2. So we've got a 4-inch border, so we're doubling that for 8, and then adding another 6. So we have 13. We're doubling the width for 8, and we're adding 6. So we're ending up with a 4-inch by 27-inch strip. Keep in mind you will use a little bit more fabric for this technique, and especially depending on the fabric you choose. So something that has a little bit more of a simple pattern and a little tighter repeat, you're probably able to cut the strips that are exactly the same a little easier. This one, to cut the exact same strips, you might lose a little bit more fabric. So we've cut our border strips and we're going to work on 2 opposite sides. Take one of your border strips and fold it in half. And we're just going to find the center, so you can finger press or add a pin or mark. And then we'll do the same thing with the top. So we'll find the center of the top as well. And then finger press that. Now we'll lay our quilt top onto the border and line up those center points, and then we'll add some pins. So you can see we have a lot of extra fabric here to work with for that miter. Next, what we want to do is take our ruler and a marking tool, and we're going to mark a 1/4 inch in from the edge of the quilt top. This is where we're going to start and stop our stitching. We don't want to go all the way to the edge. We need to leave a little bit of room for that miter. So do this on the other side as well. So now we're going to sew the border onto the quilt top. So I want to start right on that mark. So just adjust until you're right on that mark, and then add a tacking stitch or a back stitch, and then sew a 1/4 inch all the way down the side. As you come up to the end, you want to stop right on that 1/4 inch mark. So slow down. And then you can use your hand crank if you need to. And tacking stitch again, or a back stitch. And then you'll repeat that on the other side. Now I've sewn both these borders on. I've pressed my seams toward the border, and now we're going to add our 2 opposite borders. So I've already finger pressed and found the center of both borders and my quilt top, and I will layer that on top, face down, and then line up the centers and pin. Now this time we don't need to mark because we're just going to be going between the stitching lines that we've already created. This particular print does have a larger repeat, so just make sure you're placing the same side against the quilt every time, or the design isn't going to line up. When you're sewing this on, just make sure you're lined up exactly with that previous stitching line. That way there won't be a hole or a pucker in your miter. And you'll want to backstitch or stay stitch at the beginning and end of the seam as well. So we've sewn all 4 of our borders on, and now we're going to work on that miter. We'll do one at a time. So we'll fold the quilt in half diagonally, and then you're lining up the top and the bottom of the border on that corner. We've pressed our seam this way, but we do want to kind of flip it up just to make a really nice seam, and do that on the front and the back. And now we're taking our ruler with a 45-degree line and lining that 45-degree line up with our stitching. And we want that point to be right at the edge of the stitching line where we stop stitching and then draw a line down. And then we'll add some pins just to hold that in place. Now we'll just stitch down the drawn line. If your machine has a laser light, this is a great time to use it so you can make sure you're exactly on that line. And you'll want to backstitch or stay stitch at the beginning and end of this one as well. So here's what it looks like when you're done stitching. You can fold this back and just get a little preview of it and make sure you're happy with how that miter turned out. And if you are, go ahead and trim a 1/4 inch away from your stitching line. Once you've trimmed that, press it open and then press this seam toward the miter so it all lays nice and flat. Continue to miter all 4 corners. Mitered borders take a little bit more time and a little more fabric, but they can really give your quilt a polished look.